Welcome to the Life You Love podcast.
We're your hosts, Grace Lemire
and Erin Convertini.
This podcast is for the dreamers and the doers.
For the women who want to create a life they genuinely love waking up to.
We believe that life's short, so let's build one we love.
It can be intimidating to start working toward a new financial goal. Or maybe if you're just getting started, this is the first time that you're really making your finances a priority, and that's a big deal. I know from firsthand experience how hard it can be to stay motivated with your finances when you're not super clear on what you're actually working toward. For me, I wasn't able to stay disciplined with saving, investing, paying off debt until I actually got clear on what that North Star was. You hear the term financial freedom thrown around a lot, but in this episode, we're breaking down how to set goals and actually hit goals that can help you get there.
You guys loved our recent episode that was how to build an effective budget when everything's expensive AF. And it's funny because that was actually one of the very first episodes that we ever filmed on this podcast. And so we did like an updated version of it 2 years later, and you guys absolutely loved it. And a lot of you asked for more like money focused episodes, which is the root of this podcast. This podcast used to be called Girls Talk Money. So we were like, absolutely, we can definitely do this. And I know in that episode, I think we talked about saving as being part of your budget. But then when we were mapping out that episode, we realized that it's a whole separate section. Like there was just so much to share in that episode. So we migrated some of what we planned to share in that episode into this one and making this into its own episode on saving specifically and financial goals in general.
That episode was really good, like tactically how to map out your budget, how to cut back in some areas, how to figure out the areas that you want to splurge versus save on. But I feel like the financial goals piece is almost like the root of it, because like I said in the intro, I couldn't figure out how to stay disciplined with my money in terms of my budget, my day-to-day expenses, and like being disciplined with where my money was going until I got clear on what my actual financial goal was. And if you're not motivated by your financial goal, you're not going to be motivated to stick to a budget literally in the slightest. So I think that's really important to remember. It's like if you don't have a North Star, if you don't have a grand like, oh my gosh, in 10 years, this is what my dream life absolutely looks like, and here's how money is going to help me get there, it can be really hard to stay disciplined in your day-to-day. So agreed, this entire episode is going to be broken out into how to set financial goals and then how to actually hit the financial goals that you set. So we're going to start with the setting financial goals piece. And for this section, it really comes down to what does financial freedom actually mean? And this is a personal question. Like, what does it actually mean to you? Like I said, this term is thrown around a lot, like financial freedom, financial independence. But what does it actually mean? And like Grace's version is going to be completely different from my version of financial freedom. And it's also something where your definition of that might change over time. I feel like in the 7 or 8 years that I've been really disciplined with my money and have really cared about my money, my version of what this means has changed as well. So I can think of going back to when I first started caring about my money. I can give you 2 examples of when it really hit me that financial freedom, financial independence was really, it became a big goal for me. These 2 very specific scenarios. And I feel like this will help you kind of like click into what it could mean for you. So the first one was, I remember I studied abroad my sophomore year of college. And before studying abroad and like even that semester, I was not good with my money, didn't care about it, would spend every dollar that I made. I blew every single dollar that I had in my bank account that semester of college. And I remember I was coming home from that semester because the semester ended and I needed to fly back to America. And I was in a taxi going to the airport and I started crying. I cried the entire way. And I was crying not because I was like sad to leave my friends. I was crying because it hit me that I was about to become an adult and I would never, ever be in a situation again in my adult life where I could take 1 month, 2 months, 3 months and go spend a couple of months in another country. Like that really hit me where I was like, oh crap, it's time for me to become an adult. And when you're an adult, you work a 9-to-5 job and maybe you get 1 week of vacation per year, right? So I think that was the first kind of like indicator of, okay, this is never going to be possible for me again. I have to go get a regular job. Money's going to tie me away from being able to have an experience like that. But I didn't quite know how money could help me get there, right? So then 2 years later, I graduate from college. I do become an adult. I get that 9-to-5 job. And I hated my first 9-to-5 job, my first corporate job. It was actually at a government agency. I've talked about this before. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And very quickly after starting that job, it hit me again. like I'm going to be working this job or maybe a similar job that I probably also won't like for the rest of my life, literally for the rest of my life, the next 40, 50 years, giving, I think I was working like 45 or 50 hours a week at that job at the time. And I was like, literally none of my time is my own. And I'm going to be working this job for the rest of my life. And that's when it started to hit me. I was starting to learn a lot more about money and the power of money and investing and all of that. And that's when it hit me that the only way that I was going to be able to like have more time freedom than that traditional route would give me was if I got serious about my money, was if I started working toward financial freedom. So those two examples are just a good kind of like preface for this episode of like, you need to figure out what you're working for. You need to figure out what financial freedom means to you. It doesn't mean total time freedom, or it doesn't mean like, hey, I just want to take a month off in a couple of years to go travel a little bit. Like, you need to figure out what it actually means to you and what you're working toward.
I feel like having that like why is really important. And like you said, it doesn't always have to be like that you don't want to work or at all, or it could be that your why for financial freedom is I want to be able to help my family. I want to be able to like it can be whatever you want it to be. I know for me, I always like for as long as I can remember always wanted a career that had time and location freedom. Like even when I was in middle school, I was like when I grow up, I want to be a YouTuber. And I used to watch the beauty YouTubers and I tried to like start a channel and I would always like sit in front of my mirror and like talk to the mirror as I was doing my makeup as if I was like a beauty YouTuber. And I never filmed them. And then when I got to college, I started a YouTube channel because it wasn't necessarily doing YouTube itself. I liked the idea of connecting with people and being able to share things that I loved with people, which is funny that this is where I ended up in my career now. But it was more so like the lifestyle they got to live in the sense that they had a lot of flexibility and freedom. And then when I was in college, I started seeing a lot of digital nomading content on social media. So people who basically travel full time and a lot of them travel while they work. So they would be in Bali at these like gorgeous, villas on the beach or whatever and working and they have their laptops everywhere. And I would see all these blogs about it. And I just started reading more and more about it. And I craved that level of freedom and flexibility. And then I was in college. My goal was to be a human rights lawyer. That was like it was to own my own nonprofit. And then I pivoted to be like, okay, I'll do human rights law. And I took the LSAT and everything, which if you've ever studied for any sort of test like that, it's absolutely brutal. Put in all the effort for it and then took the LSAT. And I just kept feeling like this is not going to give me the life that I actually want. Yes, lawyers do tend to make higher salaries. However, human rights lawyers that are working in like public law do not make insane amounts of money, right? Like that's not the reality. And you're expected to be in the office all the time. It's like standard, kind of corporate structure. You're in the office all the time. You're sitting in a cubicle. You're really not even spending that much time in the courtroom compared to how much time you're spending prepping for your cases and things like that. And then it also impacts your life outside of work because you want to be in that one area. You're kind of tied to one area so you can build your reputation there. But then now you have a reputation there. Now, if you're out in public, people know you as the lawyer that defended so and so on this case or that person on that case. And like, I was like, hold on a second. What I actually crave out of life in general is time freedom, location freedom, and just like flexibility. And I realized law wasn't going to give me that. So when I started thinking about, okay, I was like, I'm going to take a gap year after college and I'm going to travel full time. That was my initial plan. I realized, okay, well, I need to save money for that. And I need to be able to have something that I can do that can make me money. And that's why I started my business. And I ended up not taking a whole year to travel. But what I realized was that at the core of every desire I had, every career goal I had, whatever, it was all freedom and flexibility and control over my time that was fueling that. And that comes from being responsible with your money. Like, and now where I am at like the place I am in my career, I can take a Friday off. I don't work Fridays anymore. I can take a Friday off now because I am in a position with my career where I have the control over my time. Or if I want to donate a couple $100s to something, I can, no questions asked, because I have control over my money. I can do what I want with those resources. I will say on that topic too, when it comes to figuring out what financial freedom looks like for you and the idea of control over your time, the book Psychology of Money is a really good one to read. It is I think a lot of personal development books can be kind of like overbaked and just like redone over and over and over again. But Psychology of Money is one that I think everybody should read. I think it's an amazing book. I'm actually rereading it right now, but I've read it like years ago. And it talks a lot about that, how in control of your life you feel is one of the number one indicators of happiness. And that's actually what that like quote from that book is what fueled me to start talking about money on social media. But I think you have to decide what that control looks like for you and like what makes you happy. And I think that will guide you to your own definition of financial freedom. Like if the control that you're looking to have is I want to be able to travel whenever I want. I want to be able to work whenever I want. I want to be able to quit my job. I want to be able to help support my parents in retirement. I want to be able to stay at home with my kids when I have children and not work when, you know, they're up till age 5 or whatever. Like you have to decide what aspect of your life you really want control over and then figure out how to use your money to help you control that aspect. And I think that will help guide you in figuring out what financial freedom looks like.
And I think that's a piece that a lot of people get tripped up on because, especially a lot of young people, you can end up being a little bit indecisive and be like, well, I don't want to lock myself into a financial goal because I don't know what my life is going to look like in 10 years. Or like, I don't know if that's something that I really want. For example, going back to what we were talking about earlier with your financial goals can change over time. That's so prevalent because I know for me, my financial goals and like my financial freedom goals and milestones now look totally different than they did when I was coming home from my study abroad trip or when I started my first full time job. I remember when I graduated from college, location freedom was a big, big thing for me. It was more so like the time freedom to be able to travel when I wanted. But I also was like, okay, how can I design my life and like have enough money to be able to take 2 months off to go travel at a time? I remember the job that I was in, they said in the orientation that you could basically take up to 2 months per year of like unpaid leave and still be able to get your benefits. So when I heard that, I was like, okay, like maybe I do keep this job, but I just have enough money saved to where 2 months, like 1 year, I can go take a trip to Southeast Asia or do whatever I want to do, but like have that money to be able to have that time and location freedom. Now my goals look totally different. I'm not saying that I don't love to travel, but I also don't care about it as much as I did back then. Like, I can take a week-long trip to somewhere and be totally fine and not need to live there for 3 months. I would never leave my dog for 3 months. So it's like the location freedom doesn't really matter for me as much anymore. For me, it's more so about balancing freedom and fulfillment. So having enough freedom to where I can go take my dog for a walk in the middle of the day. If I was in a corporate office from 7:30 to 5:30, I would never be able to do that, right? But if I'm working from home, I can. Or for me to be able to sleep in if I'm not feeling good, but then I can work later that night. Like that's really what I'm working toward. So I think that's a good thing to remember. It's just when you're thinking about your financial goals, do what makes sense for you right now and don't really put so much pressure on yourself to be like, I need to know exactly what my goal is in 10 years or exactly what my goal is in 20 years because things are going to change, but the strategy for how you're going to get there is probably going to be relatively the same. So if you set a goal right now and then in 5 years that goal changes a little bit, you're still probably on course as long as you're doing something productive with your money.
And I think the goal too, at least for me, is to have the choice to be able to do that, right? So, for example, if I was like, for example, I would love the opportunity to, or I might want to retire early or be not even fully retire, but like be work optional or be at a point where I can pull back and work part time. And I'm not even talking about from the sense of like retirement investing, funding, whatever, that type of situation, but I'm like, okay, can I get my business and my services to a point where if I work 20 hours a week, I'm still making like multiple six figures a year or something to be able to live the life I want, but I'm working part time. Or and that number might look different like depending on the life that you want to live. Maybe you're like, okay, could I build a business that makes me $100,000 a year and I work part time? Or maybe just building a business is like what works for you or whatever. But that is something that I think I want in this moment to be able to work less and still make, you know, enough to live a lavish life that I want. But maybe in 10 years, that won't be the case. Maybe in 10 years, I'll be like, you know what? I'm actually like so motivated in my career right now. I want to be working 40 or 50 hours a week. Who knows? I don't know. But the point is that when I get to that point, I want to be in a financial position where I have a choice. So I'm still going to do things now that put me in the position to have that choice later on. Or even like I save money for things that I'm like, buying a house I want to buy whenever my car goes and I need to buy a new car, or I have a fun money sinking fund. I don't necessarily know when I'm going to use all of those or if I'll use all of the amount that is even in those savings accounts. Like, I don't know. I'm saving for a certain number for a car. I don't even know if that's the car that I will buy because I'm going to ride my car until it falls apart. But the point is that whenever that time comes, I want to have the choice to put a huge down payment, pay for the car in cash, whatever it may be. So I'm preparing now to give myself that choice later on. And I think if we get, like you said, so focused on, I don't know if that's 100% what I want, then we don't prepare at all versus prepare. And then if you decide, okay, that's not what I want, reallocate. Like, okay, well, I have this money invested. Well, I invested so much for this goal. And now I'm realizing I don't really actually want that goal. So now I can actually just pull back a little bit on my investments. Or I saved this money for this thing and now I don't really want that thing. What else do I want actually? Great. Well, because I saved 10K for that thing, now I have 10K for this new financial goal that I have. So instead it's just focusing on like, what do you desire in this moment and how is that contributing to the financial freedom that you want? Plan for that and then know that you're going to pivot along the way no matter what goals you have.
Absolutely. We put together a list of just some kind of examples to get your wheels spinning on what this could look like for you, because we obviously give our own examples, but everyone's situation is so, so different. So these are just some examples of what financial freedom actually can give you, right? So the first one, the freedom to walk away from a job that you hate, even if it means you might not find a new one for a few months. I feel like this is so big for so many people. The feeling of working because you love it versus the feeling of I need to work because I need that paycheck at the end of 2 weeks. That makes the world of a difference in how you feel showing up to work every single day and the psychology behind it. The second one is the peace of mind that if there was an emergency, you could pay for it. I think they say like 60% of Americans don't have $1,000 saved for an emergency. So even just that peace of mind of like, if something happened to my dog and my pet insurance deductible is $3,000, like I have that deductible, like no questions asked, do the surgery. The third one, the peace of mind of not waiting for your next paycheck. The fourth one, the time freedom to take a mini 1 year retirement to travel or to take a few years off when your kids are young. I feel like this is a big one for a lot of people. If you're in your mid 20s, right? And you're like, I know having children is my goal and I really want to be a present mom, but like, how can I make sure that I'm in a financial situation where if I take a step back from work for a couple of years and maybe we're only relying on my husband's salary, do I have a little bit of a retirement fund to be working for me behind the scenes, or do I have some money sitting there to be able to take that time off without stressing about it? The freedom to quit a stressful job that you hate, work part-time, or just work a less stressful job making less money. So yeah, right, if you have a job that's super stressful, you're in the office 50 hours a week and you're like, listen, I have my financial foundation set up and I want to take some time to myself. Maybe I'm going to go down to part-time, or maybe I'm going to find an entire new career in something that I'm actually passionate about, even though it's going to make me less money because I have that financial foundation. And then the last one, the freedom to take unpaid leave for a month to travel. Maybe long-term travel is not your goal, but there are a couple of trips that you want to take. And maybe it literally is just, I want to take 3, maybe 4 weeks off to take the trip that I've always dreamed of.
Even like, well, a couple thoughts in here. One, I'm the kind of person, we've talked about this before in other episodes. I don't want a gigantic wedding. I want a small wedding, and then I would love a really nice or long honeymoon. And that's even like, it sounds, when you think about it, like a honeymoon, it seems like a blip in time, but it's like, if you want a 2 or 3 week honeymoon, there's a lot of things that have to happen in the background, right? That how are you taking time off of work? How are you affording that? Like, it's even those like micro moments, or, okay, I want to, be able to go home for Christmas every single year and fly home and stay home for a week and take the whole week off. Or I want to be able to it doesn't have to be these longer term things either. It can be just the ability to say yes to things that you really want to do. And the other thing I wanted to say, when you were talking about the freedom to take or to quit a stressful job you hate to work part time, this is so funny. I just have to mention it because I think, okay, if you guys have seen, he's one of our friends. His name is Drew. His Instagram is and TikTok is like dollars with Drew. He's an amazing like human being, but he's a content creator and he shares his journey with like financial freedom. And I know this podcast is for the gals, but I have to mention it because I think it's funny. I used to see his content and I'd be like, this is so unconventional and a little out there in the sense that he's very frugal. He's lived pretty frugally for quite some time. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. But then he got to a point where I think his net worth is like 750. He's like 34 or something. He shares this all very, very openly on his social media. He quit his 6-figure engineering job. His wife is a stay at home mom and he has 2 little girls. And he quit his 6-figure engineering job and literally he just had a job at McDonald's. He literally has documented his whole part-time job at McDonald's. He worked for he just quit McDonald's, but he worked for an airline. He is like trying out all these different jobs because he finds it fun and like he's in the financial position with his investments and he has rental property, whatever. He's in the financial position to be able to make that choice, to take a step back. He gets to spend so much time with his kids during the formative years, spending time with his wife, enjoying life, trying different things, building up his platform as a content creator because he made decisions to be able to give himself that choice. And it's funny because I used to think, I'm like, he's living so frugally, like, I was like, I don't know. I'm not going to be a rice and beans kind of gal and I don't want to be like uber frugal. But now seeing on like the flip side and you're seeing him, you're basically seeing the fruits of his labor and you're getting to see like what he's worked so hard for to have the choice to do what he's doing right now. And I'm like, dang, like yeah, I would love to do that. Like when I'm 34 and maybe I'll have kids at that age too, I would love the option to be like, yeah, I'm actually going to take a part-time job because I want to spend time with my kids. And I think that's what a lot of people actually desire. Like and I mean this in a very nice way, but Drew is not, he's very smart, he's very driven, he's very like disciplined, like he's dedicated to everything that he's doing. But it's not like Drew is I want to say Drew's not special, but I don't mean that in an offensive
No,
way, but I
no,
mean that
he's not.
he's
Exactly, he's
he's
not.
like he is a
Mhm.
normal human being who made very strategic financial decisions, very intentional financial decisions, and put himself in the position that he is in. He's not a trust fund baby that, you know, his net worth comes from. And there's nothing wrong with being a trust fund baby. Do what you need to do. Do what, you know, whatever. If you got it, you got it. Okay, period. But like, it's not like he created this brick by brick, the life that he has. And so it just goes to show how other people can create that life for themselves as well, brick by brick. But you have to be intentional about it and understanding that if that is your idea of financial freedom is similar to the financial freedom that Drew has, like you can see how he built it, you know, and that it's possible.
Yeah, I actually love that you brought this up because the next thing that we wanted to talk about was breaking down some of the bigger financial goals that people set, right? Because in this episode, we want to talk about how to set good financial goals, but then also how to tactically hit them. And I feel like Drew's example is such a good example to show you guys how someone actually did this for what we're about to talk about. So obviously, the first financial goal is retirement, right? And we have to mention this one first because I think sometimes it's a little bit overlooked. Like, if you have a corporate job or a regular W-2 job, you probably have some type of like 401k account, right? That's obviously working toward your retirement. But we have to mention it first as the first big financial goal because retirement's not guaranteed. It's just flat out not. You have to set aside money for retirement. So not to overlook that. We don't need to harp on that in this episode because I think everyone kind of knows like in the background you have to be saving for retirement, but we have to mention it here. The second one, and I think Drew's a really, really good example of that, is what Grace just mentioned. In the financial independence community, there's a term that gets thrown around. It's called Coast FI standing for financial independence. And basically, what this financial goal means is you get to a certain point in your, let's say, 30s. Drew was 34 years old, where your retirement accounts have enough money in there not to retire today, but they have enough money in there to where if you never contributed another dollar to them, by the time you get to traditional retirement age, let's say 60, your money has sat and grown in the market for so long that it gets to a point where you have enough money to retire one day. For example, let's say you're 30 years old and you have $250,000 in your retirement investment accounts. In 30 years, by the time you're 60, that $250,000 could turn into 2.5 million. Obviously, we're using a compound interest calculator to do this math. So you can see how that example is you have 250K by 30 and you never invested another dollar between the ages of 30 and 60. And why this is a really big milestone for a lot of people is because you can do exactly what Drew just did. He didn't love his engineering job. He didn't love the hours. He wanted to spend more time with his family. So he quit his 6 figure engineering job, took a lot of time off, and then got a part time job because at that point, all you need to do is cover your day to day expenses. They already have a house, so he doesn't need to be saving for a home down payment. He invested enough money so he doesn't need to keep investing for retirement. Literally, all he needs to do is make enough money in his part time job to cover his family's day to day expenses, which is actually a lot lower of a number than you might think. I mean, obviously, that depends on your lifestyle and how much money you're spending day to day. But for Drew and his family, they're not really spending that much money. So he doesn't need to make that much money. So that's that big financial goal that a lot of people are working toward because it's really giving you that freedom to design a life that you love, money aside.
And I think this all goes back to the idea of deciding what I think the root of it is like, what do you want out of life? What do you want? And like, maybe you have a job that you absolutely love and you're like, I love this and I genuinely think I will do this until the day that I die. And that's fine, right? I do think that there's value in understanding that that may change and preparing again to give yourself the choice to make a different decision someday. But maybe that is the case. And so you're like, you know what? I just want to be able to take like a lavish vacation every year. I want to just like 5 grand vacation every year. I want to ball out for a week every year. That's fine too. But I think a lot of us crave more like control over our time. And I think Drew is a great example of how to use your money to be able to get that. And I think it's also funny because I adore Drew. Like, I love his content. I just think that it's so cool, like, watching it because he's like wildly transparent. But I think like he's a great example of being able to kind of buy back your time by being strategic with your finances. And like, guys, he lives in Ohio. Like, it's not like it's not like he was like grew up in Beverly Hills and like, in a 7 bedroom mansion and is like, yeah, I'm semi-retired basically at 34. Like, no, like he's built this brick by brick. And I think it just goes to show, but that's because that's his version of freedom. That's his version of financial freedom, is having the choice to be able to spend more time at home with his wife and kids and not have to work a stressful job because he doesn't like that. That's what he wants. And so he built his finances around that.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up too, because I think that's the other pushback that you get in this space is like, well, I love my job, so I don't want to work toward that. Like, I know for me, this is another example of how my situation has changed over the last 7 years. When I first graduated from college, I was like, I want to work toward being fully retired because I hate working. I hate my job. But now I'm at a point where I love making money. I posted a TikTok video about this. I love the process of making money. It's so cool to me. I'm genuinely interested in this kind of like entrepreneurial world of like the process of building something from nothing and making money. It feels like a challenge to me, right? I don't envision my life, my adult life, as me not working. I genuinely think I will find a way to make money my entire adult life. However, just because that's my thought process does not mean that I don't have financial goals in terms of saving some money, investing some money to give myself more freedom and flexibility as my life goes on. Because the way that I look at it is, even though I still want to earn money throughout my adult life, having more money in your net worth, it allows you to take risks. If there's something that I really want to do, something that I really want to go after, a business that I want to start, I can take those risks if I have the financial foundation to do so. But if I were to just say, like, well, I always want to make money, like making money is so fun, then and I didn't save or invest any more money, then I probably wouldn't have that control over what my career actually looks like. So I think that's a good distinction as well, like when you're setting your financial goals.
I'm in the same boat where I have really enjoyed my job since I started it. I lucked out with starting a business. Like, I mean, a combination of luck and effort because it's not like I fell into it, but I think like I built it into what it is today. But I am very grateful that it's been something I've always enjoyed. But I also, like you said, being able to make changes or take risks, having a financial foundation allows you to do that with more peace. Like, there are, because I'm not a risk averse person. I'm a calculated risk kind of person. I don't mind pulling levers here and there if I feel like I've really evaluated the potential ROI of pulling all of those levers. And so it's like, okay, if I, for example, moving states, it cost me like over $10,000 to move states. There were forms I had to file with my business to like, say, I'm living here now and whatever. There's just like, there's things that have to happen when you do that. And that's a huge chunk of cash to just like throw around. But I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to like it. And I have always wanted to do it. And I'm in a financial position where I'm good with all the other things I have. And part of my rich life is I want the freedom to go try new things, to be able to move to another state if I want to. So I'm going to do that because the rest of my finances, again, are in a position where I can. And I saved for the move. So now I have the choice to be able to make that decision with more peace. But again, for me, like my idea of financial freedom always goes back to choice and having more choice. Even just like in the book Psychology of Money, one of the things it kind of like discusses and is like when you're at the store and you're looking at something, I don't think it explicitly says this, but the idea of one of the chapters is kind of around this. Like if you're at the store and you're looking at two different items, and one is like better quality and $10 more, and one is cheaper quality and $10 less. It's fun and it feels good to be able to be like, oh, no, I'm going to buy like the higher quality one, even though it's $10 more because I can. Like, I know I can afford that versus having to buy, like, you're forced to buy something because it's all that you can afford. And I think a lot of times in life in general, we end up being forced into making certain decisions because that's the only decision that we can do. Like, well, I'm forced to continue showing up for this job, even though I hate it. And maybe if you're like a nurse or something, you're like, I just, every time I hear nurses and like the things they go through at work, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm praying for all of you. But it's like, if you're a nurse showing up to a job every day where you're getting berated by clients at work or patients at work and you're leaving so exhausted, maybe you're working like these crazy hours and whatever, it would feel a lot better to be like, okay, looking at my finances, like I'm in a position where I can say, you know what, I'm going to take a sabbatical or I'm going to go find a different job. I'm going to take a month off. Having the choice and freedom to be able to quit when you need to versus saying I have to show up. Like once that choice is taken away from you, it can leave you feeling really powerless. And so making sure your finances are in a position where you have just the option to make whatever choice you want, even if the choice is I'm going to stay where I am or I'm not going to do this thing or whatever. It's about having the choice to make the decision that you want, not the one that you're forced into.
I love that. Another example of this is so my boyfriend's a pilot. I feel like I've mentioned that on the podcast before, and he loves flying. Like he loves his job so much, but we always talk about this, like obviously talking about what we see our futures looking like and finances, and we've had all of those open and honest conversations. He always says that 99% of the time the captains that he flies with when he's flying, they work like 22 days out of the month, like 22 to 25 days out of the month, which is like way more than like your standard hours, because they have to, even though they make a lot of, like, their hourly wage is really high, they have to work so much because they didn't set their finances up to be in a situation where they can take a step back. So maybe that looks like they have a couple of divorces and they have child support they have to pay, or they're sending their kids to private school that costs $100,000 a year. Like their finances aren't in a point that allow them to have that freedom over how much they fly. But when we're looking at like, okay, what does our dream life look like? He's like, I still want to fly. I love flying. I love my job. But ideally, I would do the minimum hours. Like I would fly 10 days out of the month if we had our dream financial scenario. So it's those things too. It's like you can love what you do, but you can still want more control over the things that you buy at the store, how often you're showing up to work, working part-time. I know nurses are another really great example of that, because you can set up your schedule to maybe you're working like 3 12s or something, or maybe you're working like way more in a week because you really need the money. So that's another really good example of it. Doesn't have to be like a, oh my gosh, I want to quit my job and I want to lay on the beach for the rest of my life. It doesn't have to be that. The other financial goals are obviously the material things, right? And I think we split these into two different buckets. So you're going to have your midlife goals and then you're going to have your short-term goals. And the reason why we split these is because tactically saving or investing for them is going to look different no matter, or depending on what the time horizon is, right? So midlife goals, this could look like buying your dream house, buying a lake house for your family, taking that 1 year off of work, or becoming a stay-at-home mom. And then your short-term goals, these could look like things that could happen in the next 6 months to maybe like 3 to 4 years, right? Like saving for a fully funded emergency fund. It could be buying a new car because your car is getting very old and you know it's going to break down soon. This could look like starting to save for a starter home down payment, or like we said, like wedding costs. If you think you're going to get engaged in the next like 2 to 3 years, are you saving for your wedding? And we mentioned, again, breaking these out between midlife goals and short-term goals, because if it's 10 to 15 years away, versus if it's 2 to 3 years away, that's probably going to be the distinction of whether you decide to save that money or you invest that money. So we can kind of break those out when we're thinking of how to actually tactically hit your financial goals.
On this too, I think because some people will be like, well, I don't really know what to save for. And honestly, I just encourage everyone listening to, if you're in that boat, just sit there and take a second to brainstorm what are all the things that could come up in the next, yeah, like, 6 months to 5 years. And really think about it. Like, okay, I'm 26, I'm almost 27, so in 5 years I'm going to be 32. A terrifying thought. Anyways, I'm like, wow, I don't like that math. I'm like, cut that out, cut that out. But it's like, okay, what realistically will happen in that time? Okay, I will probably move to another city. I will probably buy a house. I will probably get married, right? So it's like I'm probably going to have to get a new car because my car is probably not going to last all those 5 years. Okay, so then I can start to figure out what does it look like or how much do I need for those goals and how can I back myself out of them. So like that's what I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes.
That's what I call it, like how I back myself out of a goal
Yep.
where I'm like, okay, if I need $10,000 by this date, I back myself out to today. Okay, well, how much do I need to save each month to get there? Or what does that look like? And that also, I think it can be intimidating when you do that, but I also think it's really helpful because even if you're looking at it and you're like, okay, I don't have, if I back out all of these financial goals, I need to save an amount each month that I don't necessarily have right now to save each month, then you can use that as motivation and as a base for being, okay, I need to make an extra $250 a month to be able to save the amount that I want to save. Or, maybe I can pick up a side hustle that makes me another $10,000 a year and that can go straight into this savings goal that I have so that I'm, in this position, I have the choice to make the choice that I want when I get to that point in my life or whatever it may be. But I think taking the time to actually brainstorm like what is coming up in my life is really helpful because you don't really
Totally
think
agree.
about it much.
100%. And I also will say, if you're still sitting there like, okay, I'm brainstorming, but I have no idea what the next 5 years look like. I don't know if I want to buy a house. I don't know if I want to have kids yet. I don't know if I want to get a new car or just get a lease for a couple $100s a month. Like, you don't have to know. But I will say, if you're listening to this, most of our viewers are in their mid 20s, right? We look at our analytics and most of you guys are in your mid 20s. There's going to be something that comes up over the next 5 years that you need money saved for. And you don't have to know what that is yet. Like, outside of your emergency fund, there is going to be something, whether that be you end up getting married and you want to have a wedding, or you end up wanting to buy a house. Like, there's going to be something that you're going to need money sitting in a savings account for in liquid cash. So that's a good example of like, maybe you don't have a definitive goal, but just open a high yield savings account and start saving some money every single month. And then the opposite side of that is, and we mentioned this in our other money related episode a couple of months or weeks ago, if the money isn't being saved for a purpose, that's when it gets invested, right? So if you are sitting here being like, no, I have a pretty good idea of exactly what I want to save for over the next 5 years, and my income's really good because I'm like getting into my career. So I'm making like over 6 figures and I do have money to start saving and start investing. And how do I allocate that? What I would do is I would map out my budget, map out my savings goals, assign values to them, and whatever's left over, that's what would get invested. Because the purpose of investing that money outside of something like a 401k is you can start to set aside money that will grow for those more like midlife goals that aren't going to happen for the next like 10, 15 years. So you don't really need the money right now. So that's how I like to think about it, is like, if there's not a purpose for me saving the money, if I don't need the money in the next 3 to 5 years, I'm just going to invest it. And I don't need to know exactly what that money is going to be there for. But when I'm 35 or 40 and I have kids and maybe I want to send them to college or whatever it may be, I'll have the money starting to grow for me.
Absolutely. And I agree with just like, you don't always have to know what exactly you're saving for. And I talked about this earlier. Like, I have a fun money sinking fund. I know you have one too. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to use that on necessarily. And sometimes I pull money from that for something else. Like, I'm like, you know what? I'm
Yep.
going to pull for something that's for giving. Like, I have a giving budget, but sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'm going to pull money from my fun money sinking fund just to give, to donate or something. That's fine too. Like, it doesn't have to be the exact purpose that you put it in there for, but the purpose is to have money available to you if you need it. And I think some of those longer term goals as well, like, I guess we're considering them short term here, but ones that are 3 to 5 years away, I think those can sneak up on you very, very quickly. Like a car, for example, so many people, your car dies one day, or God forbid you get in an accident, or you know what I mean? Something is wrong with the car that is going to cost so much to fix. It's more than the value of the car. You don't want to be in that position being like, crap, like I did not plan for this at all. And now I'm screwed. And again, I'm forced into some sort of decision that I don't want to make, or I'm not able to make any decision at all. And I'm without a car. Or I just saw a video the other day of a girl who's in an apartment where there's water leaking in through the window, and the mold, and there's like mold and whatever. People were like, "Can you buy yourself out of the lease and then sue the landlord?" And she's like, "Yes, but it literally is going to cost a bunch of money to do it." And I don't know her financial situation, so she might have that money available. But again, that's a situation where it's like, if you end up in that position, having money saved just generally, it doesn't even have to be for the specific goal of, well, if anything ends up happening with my house and I need to get out of it, you have that money available to you. So if you're like, I don't know, again, what I want to save for, just start putting money aside, and then you have it available. So you're able to make a choice that you want to when that arises.
Percent. And now we just want to like cover very quickly, because I feel like this is a little bit intuitive, hitting your financial goals piece, right? Because hopefully this episode inspires you to go brainstorm about all of the things that are going to come up over the next 5 to 10 years, and hopefully not stress you out. Like, start making a plan for what exactly your dream life is and how money can be a tool to help you get there. But then what does that look like on your day to day? Like, how do you actually hit those financial goals? And in my opinion, this is broken down into two pieces, right? So the first one is figuring out what you can afford to save, invest, maybe debt payoff is your financial goal. What can you afford to put toward those financial goals today? And then the second piece of this is, what's your plan for increasing that amount, right? Maybe you are figuring out how much you can afford to put toward your financial goals today, and the number's not as big as you want them to be, but you have really big financial goals. What is the plan for helping you close that gap? So on the first piece, like figuring out what you can afford today, this is really going to be a matter of looking at your budget and then making sure you're being disciplined with your budget. And that's what our entire episode was about a couple of weeks ago, was really figuring out your expenses, figuring out where you can save, where you do want to splurge on intentionally, but then what's the amount monthly that you can afford to put toward your financial goals? And then how do you make sure that the money's physically being transferred into those accounts every single month? Because I think a lot of people also have really good intentions with saving, and maybe like theoretically they have a couple $100 every single month to save, but then the money never ends up getting transferred and then they end up spending it. So what's your process for mapping out how much you can save or invest or pay off debt? And then how do you make sure that the money physically gets into those accounts consistently?
I think on the topic of, or the point of like making sure the money gets over there, I feel like, if, which we talk about this so much in so many of our episodes, and if you follow us on social media, you're going to be like, girl, we know, we know. But tracking your spending and budgeting, I feel like genuinely, if you have financial goals and you want to accomplish them, I personally feel like budgeting and tracking your spending is absolutely necessary for doing that. I personally don't do any automatic transfers like in my bank account. I like to transfer, like when I'm transferring from checking to savings at the end of every month, or my investments are automated. But if I make like an extra investment with extra money that I have, I'm doing that manually. I don't have an automatic transfer for it, just because it doesn't like click in my brain. But if setting them up that way, every single month this amount gets transferred over, yeah, absolutely do that. But otherwise, having a process for yourself where, for example, the first of the month, I sit down, I make my budget for the month. I track my spending every 1 to 2 weeks, just depending on if I know I didn't have a very spendy week. I'm just like, yeah, whatever. But I've also been doing this for like 5 years now. So I can go a week without tracking my spending because I know that I will be within budget. I'll be fine. But then I'll track that. Then at the end of the month, like the last day of the month, I sit down and I track, I finish tracking all of my expenses, and then I look at, okay, what do I have to save or invest? And then I make all of those transfers like in that moment. And then I make my budget for the next month. And that process really works for me. So I'm really sitting down. It's only sitting down like what, 4 times a month, 4 or 5 times a month. And I think that showing up for your finances 4 or 5 times a month is like, I think we can find some time, we can commit to that. But that really works well for me to be able to do that at the end of the month, because some months, for example, the other month I was under budget in a lot of my wants categories. And so I actually had extra to save. So if I had automatic transfers set up I would have just made an extra transfer of the extra I had to save. But then I was able to say, okay, I'm actually going to save this much towards this much towards that, and put it in my budget template so that my template reflects that as well. In like the annual summary tab, I can see how much I saved for all of my different goals since I tracked it. But I think like you have to figure out what works for you and know yourself. If you're not going to sit down and like transfer things into savings manually, then like set up automatic transfers. But yeah, you have to find a process that works for you to be able to commit to doing that.
Yeah, it's definitely all about what works best in your brain because I do have the automatic transfer set up and it's super easy to edit. Like I use SoFi
Mhm.
for my high yield savings account and I have all of the buckets for all of my different savings goals. And the automatic transfers take like actually 1 second to set up. So if I need to alter it throughout the year, like I totally can. But I like that as kind of like a base, like this is my minimum amount that I want to save every single month. And then I do the same process. Like I track my spending consistently, obviously. And then I, at the end of the month, look at how much I earned and versus how much I spent. What's that difference? Factoring in the fact that I've already saved a little bit of money through my automatic transfers. And then if there is a difference, I can make an extra transfer. I also will say that's kind of like getting into the paying yourself first method, which a lot of people talk about. And the idea there is you're not waiting until the end of the month to save and invest because then you're going to get to the end of the month and not have any money left to save and invest. And I think the pay yourself first method is almost talking about when you are, I don't want to say living paycheck to paycheck, but like the amount of money in your checking account is literally just like the money you made that month. And you kind of are getting out of that living to paycheck cycle. But I personally keep like a buffer in my checking account. I call it like a checking fund. So I don't budget based on like the dollar value in my checking account. I budget based on the amount of money that came into my checking account that month, my paycheck. So when you do have a checking fund and you have a little bit of a buffer and it doesn't really make a difference what that dollar value is in your checking account, it matters a little bit less, like whether you're paying yourself first or whether you have the automatic transfers or whether you do it at the end of the month. So I will say, like, if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, but like what do I do? Do I set up the automatic transfer? Do I wait until the end of the month? Is it bad to wait until the end of the month? Figure out what works best in your brain. It's not that deep. Don't get tripped up over like the logistics. Just start transferring the money into your savings account.
Genuinely with anything, like, which I feel like we kind of, it's like kind of brings everything together that we were talking about with figuring out what your financial goals are and what financial independence or financial freedom looks like to you. It's unique to you. And the same way that you go about saving your goals, are there frameworks and ideas and thoughts around what those things should look like and how you should do it? And are there tactics you can implement that? Yeah, absolutely. But it ultimately has to make sense to you in your brain. I mean, if you watch personal finance content, which assuming that a lot of y'all do, if you like see some of our finance content, but you'll notice people do things very differently. There are people that I know who literally have multiple checking accounts at the same bank because they like to break up their paycheck to have, okay, well, my rent is going to come out of this checking account, this is coming out of this checking account. Or some people have multiple savings accounts instead of just having one savings account with buckets, like how we use SoFi and Ally. Both of them have buckets where you can kind of divide up your savings. Some people have multiple savings accounts, or if they're saving for a certain goal, like buying a house, they put that money in a completely different savings account at a completely different bank because they want it out of sight, out of mind. There are people who only use cash, like my dad, for as long as I can remember. He has a card, he'll use it, but his process is he takes cash out of the bank every month. That's the money that he gets to spend that week. When he runs out, he runs out. That's it. Like that's how he has operated, and that's what makes sense to him in his brain. And my mom's very different. I'm very different, right? But it's not to say that one is better than the other. It's like at the end of the day, is it generating the financial life that you want to live? Yes or no. And if you want to be, you know, if you have financial goals that you want to accomplish, you just have to make sure that however you're setting up your finances, it's bringing you closer and closer to that financial goal.
Definitely. I love that. And I agree that that was a good way to wrap up the entire episode. But with that being said, let us know in Spotify if you like this episode. You guys did tell us when we did our last money episode that you wanted to see more of this. And obviously, we have so much money content way back in the podcast when we were Girls Talk Money, but I kind of like this way better. Like, obviously, not every single one of our episodes are money focused, but we can do one dedicated one every so often if that's what you guys prefer. So let us know in Spotify what else you want to know and what else you would like to see in another money focused episode, especially since we're coming up on the end of the year and everybody everybody really likes to do a deep dive into their finances and get their money organized in the new year. So let us know in Spotify. If you have any other episode ideas or questions for us, leave those in Spotify as well, because we really do use Spotify as like a single source of truth, like sourcing questions for our Q&A episodes, sourcing episode ideas. So definitely leave those in Spotify. But with that, thanks for tuning into the podcast, and until next week.